Hello and a very warm welcome to this edition of Public Forum. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on an 8-day tour to Russia and Central Asia, and while addressing the BRICS summit at Ufa in Russia today, and at this point of time I'm joined by Dr. Sreeram Chaulia, Dean, Jindal School of International Affairs. Welcome to the program. Dr. Chaulia.
Yeah, I think now we are in a stage of consolidating some of the institutional innovations that we have done over the floated in the last few years. So the finance minister has also been there, and the first board meeting of the New Development Bank has taken off. So that's encouraging. Prime Minister has also announced that the first project for funding of the New Development Bank, there was a lot of guessing game as to what it will be. He said it's going to be on alternative energy. So that's something very frontier and cutting edge that will set this group apart. There's also, I think, obviously an attempt to create a long-term vision for BRICS. So they talked about kind of a partnership for 2020, 2025 and those kind of blueprints. And there's also lots of new things. So President Putin has been pushing for an energy union. That's something new that will, because BRICS is a mix of energy suppliers and energy consumers, and it will inevitably be intertwined with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting, which is coming up, because there we have been pushing for this north-south transport corridor for energy. So these are all going to be important initiatives, I think. And I think the big question, of course, is that the economies of most of the BRICS countries have slowed down. We have lost some of that glass that we had in the past. So there's a lot of focus on trade and on enhancing trade. Prime Minister made a couple of very interesting suggestions. One was, he said we should have a BRICS trade fair, an annual trade fair,
Right.
and that's a very good idea. He's also proposed to ease the visas for BRICS business people to travel, and also to tackle some of these thorny customs and non-tariff barriers. So all these, if you add up, so while the global picture is gloomy and BRICS themselves are not looking like, they're not red hot anymore, the point is that they are making determined push for establishing this institutional thing. The other thing I would mention is, which is a little more abstract, which is we're trying to create a BRICS identity. The group identity, it takes a while to come. So while it's been there at the elite level, now with all these branching out and all these mechanisms and sub-mechanisms that have come within the BRICS forum, we can now see that it is taking shape. So sports, culture, all these will add up. Prime Minister just tweeted that there is just one BRICS family, and one can be rhetorical about it, but the point is, when we use such dear terms, what he's trying to say is that there's a group identity that is also emerging. So for me, that is another kind of inchoate kind of takeaway from this summit in Ufa.
Okay, but Dr. Chaulia, do you see there are practical challenges which these countries will be facing, because you see the global economy is not really in very good shape? You see a lot of challenges they're emerging from all the trading partners, and there you have, these countries may have their own domestic issues too. So how to ensure the contributions limit being met by these countries, and whether there can be any scope of ensuring equal distribution of responsibilities as well as the share among these nations?
I think they have departed from the Bretton Woods model when creating their own bank, insofar as the weightage goes. I mean, it's clearly, and if you see the structure, governing structure, the head is going to be Indian, they're going to have 2 vice presidents, and it's, I think, not necessarily on the basis of, the largest contributor will dominate or, will control the strings. It's, as the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister was saying, in BRICS, nobody imposes anything over anybody else. And the Chinese talk about this, they talk about what they call equal multilateralism, which is the idea that irrespective of our capacities and material capabilities, we will have some kind of equality of status at the level of decision making and policy making. So while that may not be so true for SCO, which is more dominated by China and Russia, as opposed to smaller Central Asian republics, for BRICS, I think they have made concessions and have tried to accommodate this fear of the asymmetry, which is everything is loaded in the Chinese favor. But so I think they are going to, so unlike, let's say, the IMF, which is pretty much a proxy for American economic interests, not even American state economic interests, as Ambassador Tyler is saying, Wall Street interests often. Here it's different. I mean, here we're talking about The philosophy is different because we are more state dominated economies, all the BRICS countries. We have greater level of state intervention and regulation, and I think even it's interesting. We have, for example, they have just announced that they are going to create an infrastructure fund, which will be which will coexist along with the New Development Bank. Now, the infrastructure fund is going to invite private sector investments. So it's not going to be that the lending will come only from the pool of sovereign wealth, as in from government treasuries. They're also going to supplement it with some private sector contributions. Now, that is where the test lies. Are we going to, so if they say, okay, there are all these venture capitalist funds and private equities in Wall Street, which are more attuned towards these emerging economies. They have separate, emerging economy funds and so on. Now, are they going to rush in and are they going to try and steer it in a different direction, or will the governments, who are, well, of course, the Chinese government is not democratic. Russia probably you can question credentials, but at least notionally the governments represent the people more than the banking interests, right? And that is where I think the BRICS institutions will try to set a different political economic model than what you've seen in the past from the IMF, the World Bank, and the ADB.
Well, at the BRICS summit, we also heard the Prime Minister talk about digital technology and how it can play a crucial role in financial inclusion and the delivery of services. Also, the fact that there should be more conversation and cooperation between cities. Dr. Chaulia, how do you read those lines? Because that is something I think he has said at almost all the platforms. Let the cities have their own channels. Let them cooperate with each other. In fact, with China, we have a different arrangement now. How do you look at that?
Yeah, digital is important. There are a couple of things. One is cyber security, and the other is, of course, this internet governance issue. And in fact, President Xi Jinping mentioned both in his talk today in the plenary. And clearly, that's somewhere we all need to think about how we can secure our communication systems from a security point of view, against intrusions and spying and attacks and so on. Of course, it is a fact that the Chinese have been spying on us and vice versa. But then there is also the question of what we can do in terms of technology sharing. Because the Brazilians, when Dilma Rousseff's phone was being tapped by the Americans, had proposed the idea of creating some kind of an intranet kind of thing, which would be, where we would be somehow more secure, or relatively more secure. Even the Germans have talked about it. These are some of the ideas that we need to develop. At some point, being low technology countries compared to the West, relatively, we need to pull in resources, scientific know-how. That's one. The issue of the governance is apparently there's a kind of a discord within the BRICS, because the more authoritarian countries like China and Russia want complete state control, while we have come out on the side of more civil society and being less government dominated. But nonetheless, I think these two will be important insofar as Prime Minister's own push for e-governance and so on. And it's so fascinating that even Xi Jinping today spoke largely about revamping the governance system within China. And the fact that he's making that announcement in front of a multilateral body, where usually China talks about non-interference and these things are outside the bounds of diplomatic settings, as in they are domestic issue. But the fact that he's making a commitment, we want to modernize our governance and we want to make it more accessible to the people and so on. Clearly, I think at the root of all this is the economic anxiety. The Shanghai and Shenzhen stock markets have been suddenly in a slide, and there is a bit of a panic. The government has even overreacted to try and stop this slide, because they fear that it may spread and may create a kind of a Lehman Brothers kind of crash. So
could we sense some sort of reflections of the Greek crisis too here?
Well, they have said that they had a word about it, but they are not actually going to get involved, because it's basically the EU's baby, or they're going to leave it to the Europeans. But my own position is that, in fact, the Chinese had been approached by Greece 2 to 3 years ago, when they had to go through one more round of these bailouts and austerity packages. At the time, the Chinese had decided that it is not worth, that it would basically lose money to try and pull their chestnuts out of the fire. But at the level of global governance, what is the kind of example that the the Troika has set, and what kind of counter example can BRICS do? I don't think they are bold enough to go that far, but we should be pushing it, because otherwise what is the kind of leadership we can think about offering collectively on the world stage the biggest crises are beyond our remit, and we are simply say that we exchange views on it. You know, so I think global economic governance, we are already making an inroad through these alternative institutions to Bretton Woods, and sooner or later, crisis management. I mean, the IMF blundered badly in Greece, and through their austerity medicines, they themselves have in a way backtracked now from it last couple of years. But the initial years, the IMF was with the rest of them, trying to basically railroad Greece into unviable path. So I think BRICS have the capacity to do it. They have the resources. It's only a question of whether they take the bold approach. The boldness is also in currency. At the level of currency, they're talking about trading in their own currencies now. Increasingly, inter-BRICS trade is around 300 billion now, and they're saying it has grown 70% over the last few years. So while it is true, as Pramit is saying, that China is the hub and the others are around it, the fact is, at least in absolute terms, the trade is increasing. And what it means is, if we are going to trade more in our own currencies, we're talking about even financing in our own currencies. These are going to be like the next generation ideas. And frankly, there is a BRICS academic forum. There are a number of intellectuals behind this, and they should be pushing forward, because the governments will always be cautious. The governments will never openly say we are an alternative to World Bank or IMF. But the question is not reading them on face value, but proactively try and steer them in a particular direction.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to ask that China is the biggest growing economy, and it would be very sort of unfair that it would be dumping all its products to India. How would India grow with that? I mean, at one end, India is saying that you should stop import from China, and at the other end, what China is trying to do is that it would flush all its raw material and all to India and other developing nations.
Fine. Thank you very much for that question, Dr. Chaulia. Would you please like to address that?
Yeah, it's actually a bilateral concern. I don't think we're going to bring it up at the BRICS level. We have been talking about it to try and alleviate it. In a way, the infrastructure fund and the New Development Bank could potentially alleviate some of it, in a way, by bringing Chinese capital into our country for investment, for infrastructure, and that will, in a way, try and mitigate some of the trade deficit that we have with the Chinese. So I think it's not a question of fairness, unfairness. It's also about competitiveness. I mean, Chinese have such a large manufacturing base, and we don't. And Chinese goods are cheaper. And what we often forget when we talk about dumping is that it also has some positive benefits in the form of enhanced consumer welfare. It keeps our prices under control, inflation. But of course, it's a strategic problem. I'm not denying it. So at the BRICS level, what happens often is people do have their axes to grind, as my panelists have said. For example, the Chinese have been condemning, looking forward to the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II, and they want a condemnation of Japan. We are not happy doing that. The Russians want, Ukraine to be brought in there, and basically to say that we are opposed to NATO expansion. We don't have much of a position on that. And then we have our own issues, Lakvi and so on again. So what happens usually at these summits is people do, especially on the sidelines, bring in their pet peeves and air their grievances. But I think Prime Minister has been very firm with the Chinese on this question, on the trade deficit issue. And I think we'll eventually be able to solve it. And BRICS may, in a way, facilitate it through bringing in more investments. And I think that's we should be celebrating that.
Okay, Dr. Chaulia, would you like to add something?
Yeah, imbalances will be a problem. I would hope that the multilateral process at BRICS will also help to create some kind of common standards, which can then be imported back into the domestic economies of these struggling countries, and we can somehow do better in terms of promoting innovation and removing some of these red tape. And Prime Minister, actually this is the time for India to take lead. Statistically, we are doing better than everybody else in GDP growth, and even the IMF says that we are the brightest spot among all the BRICS. So therefore, we must be actually taking the lead in terms of showing a greater sense of confidence there, and proposing the new things, which, for example, the governance, some of these smart ideas that Prime Minister keeps coming up should be able to be enshrined at the BRICS level, which can then help some of these moribund economies also come up. In a way, if we are, we can always say that we have been takers of rules. The idea of India and BRICS has been that through this forum, we'll also be able to shape the global rules. And this is the moment for it, because we are right now at the forefront in terms of the economics, and the future seems to be in our side.
Fine. On that note, we'll wrap up this discussion. Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for joining us. That's all we have for you in this edition of Public Forum. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.